Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Laura Brandenburg from Bridging the Gap, and we're here today with Disha Trivedi, who's going to
Hello.
share a lot about her business analysis career. So thank you, Disha. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure.
Awesome. So let's just dive right in here. Do you want to tell me a little bit about your current role as a business analyst?
Sure. Currently, I'm working in government space, and I'm working on a project where we are implementing a requirements management tool, but that's going to be a central repository for all the system models and test cases and everything. So in my role right now, I'm helping them define the whole process of how the requirements will get in there, and we are also building a custom technology to capture custom attributes for the requirements and basically standardize the whole requirements management process. Um, and I'm also writing a lot of backend scripts, a lot of them actually, because that allows us to, query the backend and
Uh-huh.
create a lot of reports as we go. Because the organization that I'm working with has it's pretty big. So while we are still getting to a point where everything, like everybody is consistent, we have a lot of audit scripts that we're using. So
Okay. And what does your work look like day to day? What does a typical day look like?
so I'm working with one main stakeholder, and she's my window into the organization. Um, However, I do interact with stakeholders from individual teams as and when needed. But I think I've been doing most of my work has been around the tool called Enterprise Architect. And like I said, these days I've been working a lot on scripts.
Mhm.
And Sometimes I'm also working on what's called MDG. It's just a fancy name for building custom technology that works with
Right.
Enterprise Architect, and lets you capture custom data that you want to for requirements, basically.
Right. So it's
Yeah.
both like the business analyst role and that you're analyzing the business process for this
Yes.
requirements process, right? And it sounds like some of the technical hands-on in the
Right.
tool and the setup.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think the value that I bring is that I understand, what a good requirement is and what kind of attributes we should be capturing. And also because I've worked with this application before, Enterprise Architect, it's also called Sparx, because I've worked with Sparx before, that I'm able to kind of merge, expertise in both, and
Right.
help them get where they want to be.
Right. Because your most recent role was like very different,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
So for this, I was actually more in an agile environment. I was working as a product owner, where I was in communication with more than one stakeholder. And we also had our team was geographically dispersed. And I would get all the requirements from the product manager, because product manager was more external business facing. And then I would work with my development teams, to basically, to take the requirements and actually turn that into a deliverable. And what else? We were integrating two different systems, so we had two different teams, and a lot of cross learning going on there, because each team was expert in their own domain. And me and another product owner, our role was to define the requirements and to outline things in a way that those two teams together could give us the functionality that we needed.
Right. So were there a lot of challenges like navigating that communication and getting people on the same page?
Yes. So we used to have a lot of meetings, as you can imagine, right? And because the team was, geographically dispersed, we used to have a lot of conference calls and stuff. However, the team dynamics were great, and so anytime anybody had a question, the other party, the subject matter expert, they were always there. And just because of the time zones, because we had US, Russia, and India, like we had coverage 24 hours kind of. um, one of the challenge that we faced, and it was not more so from the development perspective, but we did not have a scrum master for some time. And they saw me as a natural choice because I was already working with the team. So I delved into that a little bit, and while I enjoyed doing that part, I also think that the team made it a lot more straightforward for me, because we already had great team dynamics going on. And I also learned that it's not something that I enjoy to do. Analysis
Yes.
is not.
Sometimes we need those like right turns to show us.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. Analysis is something that really drives me, and
Yeah.
but I was happy to do it for some time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I've loved because I forgot to introduce you are also an instructor for Bridging the Gap and a past course participant. I feel like I've known you forever, like probably close to the 10 years that we've been in business. So this is the first time we're recording something like this. But you've been telling me recently like how much you love business analysis, right? And it's always part of what you do and how tied in you feel to that. So I
I
can see the
slowly
product owner role fitting much better than a scrum master, right?
Yes, yes, yes. And
Yeah.
definitely, my story definitely starts with bridging the gap. The first exposure that I had was in college in my software engineering class. And I loved that class. And, we learned about extreme programming, and the whole software engineering. And at that point, I was like, oh, this is cool. I like this. But I didn't think much about it because starting right out of college, I worked as a software developer. But then I learned about this role called business analyst. And when I had decided to make the transition, you had just come out with the book on how to start your business analysis career. So I got that ebook and I went through it, and I was like, that was further validation that this is something that I'll truly enjoy. And then I used to read a lot of your blog posts, and I used to attend IIBA webinars. And even before I formally had the role of business analysis, um, I was already working towards it, in the sense that I first started by understanding what that role is, and then gradually I started taking on more duties that would allow me to transition into this role. So once I had made the decision that I wanted to be more people facing and I wanted to be a business analyst, my next position that I landed was that of a technical analyst.
Hmm.
So I was still working, with a lot of folks, and I was working on use cases and models, different models, class diagrams, and things like that. But that I think that was the transition period, and then my next role was that of a business analyst.
Right. So just to like connect some of the dots there, did you start in that software developer role
I,
doing more business analysis even before you got to the technical analyst role? Or
um,
did you kind of have to get into that role first?
so when I was a software developer, I did not have a lot of I did not have a lot of opportunities to actually work on the kind of deliverables that a BA would, but still, because it was a small company and I was working on, like, I was working with the stakeholders directly to get the requirements, there was still
Hmm.
a component to it, but I would say like 5 to 10%, not a lot. But
Hmm.
then I actively started seeking out responsibilities, and in my role as a technical analyst, my manager was extremely supportive of this. So he used to give me projects where there would be a little bit uh, more business analysis kind of work to do. And actually, that is where I first started using Sparx. We used to use Sparx to capture use cases, and yeah, so it was like one step after the another.
Right. Kind of continuing to move from less from a technology more to a business role. And it's interesting now that your career has kind of shifted more, it sounds like almost back in more of a technical direction as well. Are you enjoying
Yes.
that? Yeah.
I yes, I do. I am enjoying that because, it's very interesting to know a software or an application from the front end and then to learn the back end of it and be able to extract out information that you wouldn't otherwise be able to access through the front end. And it's just so powerful that I enjoy that. However, as you know, I'm a hardcore business analyst, and
Yeah.
I'll stay that way. But definitely, this role allows me to beautifully blend, the technical know-how that I have, and also, just the pure analysis part that I enjoy.
hmm
Definitely.
Yeah. So kind of it keeps you enough in the analysis space.
Yes, it does. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Any other milestones in your careers you think, we talked about software developer, technical analyst, and then you're really your first business analyst role. I guess we didn't talk very much about that. What did that look like?
So that one was quite interesting because we that was an organization which recognized the role of BA. They had a lot of BAs. However, most of the BAs had moved from the support role. So they did not have formal education on
hmm
what a BA does, and which is fine because, I mean, not that it's totally fine, but they had a lot of domain expertise,
hmm
that is to balance things out. But that role was interesting. In the sense that they were also trying to convert to agile at that point, and there was a lot of chaos. And I feel that, like, I talk to some BAs and I see that they are like, oh, there's so much ambiguity, right? And how can one work in a situation like this? And I think that while a certain order of you know consistency and process is required, however, I think as BAs we can really shine when there is a lack of that, right? Because that
Right.
is where we in value, because we are able to recognize those gaps and fill those gaps.
hmm
Um, but overall, I think my work in that organization was interesting. It was good. I started out as a senior BA, and then I became a lead BA, and then a product owner, everything within like 3.5 years. And I got to train a lot of those other BAs as well.
hmm
So yeah, that was interesting.
Right. Now, at what point in that journey did you, because I know you did courses with us as well, at what point did you do your formal training? Because you mentioned the BAs you worked with kind of didn't
Um,
have the benefit of that. Yeah.
right. So I was actually using the book that you had published, and
hmm
then doing my CBAP in I think I did it quite around the same time as you in 2012, I think. Um,
Right.
I think that's all. I did not do any other formal course because I have a background in computer science, so
hmm
I had learned some of these things, but it was actually being able to be in the role where I could really implement that knowledge in
Right.
real.
So you did the training once you were in that senior BA role and then going for your CBAP, right? But
Yeah.
you had the benefit of probably learning a lot of those techniques in your
Yes.
computer science role, yeah, or education,
Yes.
right? Yeah, I think that's always an interesting question for people of like, when is the right time for training, right? It's a little different for everyone, but I liked how you positioned that.
Right. So I think the way I sort of approached that was I read I read the BABOK when I was still a software developer. So even before the technical analyst role, I had already gone through BABOK to understand, the role and what the expectations are from the industry of the BAs. And that, I think, helped me connect a lot of dots between what I had learned in school versus, how things are done in actual life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So you started to assimilate kind of the industry standards as well. Yeah,
Yes.
awesome.
Yes.
Any other milestones you want to share as you think backwards from all that you've accomplished?
No, I think I've covered most of everything. I think CBAP definitely was good because I was expecting my first child and I wanted to make sure that I get it done before the baby arrives.
Right, we did that together, right?
Yes.
Pregnant and studying for the CBAP.
And then there was this one point where the content used to make sense, but then every time I would try to attempt the question like my answer would be wrong, and I wasn't able to figure out what was going on. And then you wrote that article where you were going through the same thing, and it was like a good a good validating point saying that okay.
Yeah, because there's like that additional layer when you're going for the certification of like, yes, I know how to do this, but how do I actually answer test questions around it?
Right. But I think just going back to your question, I think more in terms of milestone, I think I've always had my sight on what I can do next as a BA, and I've just tried to get in as much information as I can through webinars and through through blog posts and things like that, um, and um, and I think I've been able to get to that next level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then one of the things we haven't talked about yet as well is your role with us as an instructor. How is that? What do you enjoy about that? Maybe we'll start there.
So I think when I think of the instructor role, I think it does more good for me than I'm able to do for the participants, because there's not only do I learn so much from the projects that they pick up, but also it is the best part of it is being able to guide somebody in that role, and I like to keep myself available in case they don't have, like, they're not already in an IT environment, or if they don't already have a project that they can work with, because I remember that can be really challenging initially when you are not formally in that role yet. But I think getting other BAs onto this path is what I enjoy the most about being in the instructor role.
Right, and you're a great supporter and kind of helping people connect the dots and take that forward next step too, and just that clarity of sometimes when you're doing something for the first time, or not sometimes, almost every time, right? It's just like you need somebody to connect the dots and meet you where you're at and take the next step. And I see that in the work that you do with our participants.
Right, because there are times when it's like you don't know what you don't know, and having somebody outsider's perspective, I think that helps, and I'm hoping that I'm able to provide that
Right.
perspective to our participants.
Yeah, and you had shared how this work helped you with your job search at one point as well, right? Like it was a leverage point. Yeah.
Because after my second kid, I decided to take a break. More so for my older daughter, I decided to take a break, and I was off. Like I was not working for I think 6-7 months, but because I had never been not working, I was very uncomfortable. And then I had reached out to you, and the fact that we collaborated, and I was working with BTG as an instructor. When I went in for interviews, I felt much more comfortable saying that, like, I'm working as an instructor, but I'm ready to take on like full-time work, or basically to take on more. So my work at Bridging the Gap has been amazing in a lot of regards.
Oh, and it's been amazing to have you too. And I remember you emailed me and you're like, I actually negotiated like a better thing, and I felt so good going in, and that was really fulfilling to me as well, because I love that we were able to do that in a really flexible way, and
yes,
our model, right?
I did not think that my first opportunity itself would be a remote work, because I wanted remote work at that point, and I was able to get remote work. So,
and are you still working remotely now?
I am.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. It gives a lot of flexibility for sure.
It does. It does.
Yeah, and I know we didn't plan to talk about this, but I get a lot of questions from people about finding remote work, succeeding at remote work, right? Do you have any
Sure.
recommendations around that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So my first opportunity to work from home, I had already been going into office for that particular role, but we were moving because my husband found a job in Northeast, and we did want to move to Northeast. We used to be in South Florida. Um, so at that point, I think it helped me transition to being a remote worker because I already knew the people that I was working with.
Hmm.
However, in my next project in that same organization, like I said, the team itself was everywhere. Like, we had team in Russia and India, and a couple of us were here in North America. And it worked out because we had good collaboration tools. But I think what definitely helps me is being disciplined. And I think for me it came naturally because I was already used to going into office. So even right now for me it's like by 7:30 or 8 I am downstairs in my office, and then I get done as well, like around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock I'm done, right? So I maintain that same schedule. And definitely a dedicated office space is a must have. um, and also, like, I try to go out like once a week for lunch or something, because otherwise you miss out on that social interaction, which again for me thankfully is through BTG. um, um, yeah, I think
And
that's,
but then since then you found another job that's with a new company where you were
yeah,
working remote, right? And
exactly.
how did that come to be?
Yes, and I think that was the one that I was not expecting, right?
Mhm.
And at that point, I had interviewed with two companies and I got job offers from both. One of them was 20 minutes away from me, and the other one was an hour away. And they said the one that was an hour away, I declined them because I said, because of the commute, even though I really liked what the project had to offer. And they said, if that's the only thing, then we are okay with you working remotely, because the team that I work with are everybody's in California anyways. I don't interface with anybody locally. So it worked out. And like I said, good collaboration tools.
Yeah.
And I'm always available during the work hours.
Hmm.
So I think,
Yeah, and being clear about what you wanted, right? You created that boundary that opened up that opportunity for you.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And the Sparx application, I think they were having a hard time finding somebody with the expertise
Hmm.
on Sparx, and I was able to bring that. And I'm not saying I'm unique. I'm not saying I'm unique, but I think it was just
We all are unique. You're unique. Yeah.
it was just a right match at the right time for us.
Yeah. Yes, and you had the leverage of having kind of that perfect intersection of school
Yes,
skills that they wanted. Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Perfect. Oh, thank you for sharing that, because we get a lot of questions about that, and it's nice to offer people like actual suggestions from people who've made it happen now several different times.
Yes,
So
but one main tip would be, like, discipline, definitely, like, that I think that is the big thing. That is the
yeah,
big thing. Yeah, because they cannot see you, but if you know that you're responsible for things, and if you are being proactive and
mhm,
everything, then it works out.
yeah. And so, anything else you'd like to share before we move to our closing question?
um I think I would like to highlight, what I already said, that BAs who are starting new, please don't shy away from circumstances where there is ambiguity or there is chaos, because you as a BA have that special superpower to ask questions and to make that difference. So I know that, like, if somebody is starting off new, they might not necessarily um, have that confidence, but as a BA, you have that superpower. So yeah.
Yeah. Don't shy away because that's your superpower. And that's where your value comes from too, right? Is jumping into some of those situations.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
think that's how I define success for me is to see how much value I am able to deliver, right?
Right.
Because
Well, that's a great transition to our final closing question, right? Is what does success look like for you? Yeah.
yeah, like bringing value. And now that I'm talking to you and I'm thinking about 10 years back when so when I started 10 years back, there was not that much standardization, right? IIBA was trying to get this profession there, and um, different companies would have different expectations out of the role of BA, and they're also be used to, like, blends of the BA role, right? So there was a lot of bandwidth in terms of what a BA could do. However, I think IIBA has done a good job in standardizing this profession, and so now when I'm working with a team, I'm always thinking how can based on what I know, right, based on the tools that I have, the skills that I have, how can I deliver more to this project or to this initiative is how I try to approach
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So success looks like always delivering more value. And I love
Yeah.
that. All right.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Disha, for your time today. I know that people are going to take away a lot of tidbits and inspiration from your story. And congratulations on all these amazing roles you've had.
So much. And Laura, of course, you are the cornerstone of this whole journey.
Oh,
Started
yes,
with you and it continues with you.
yes. And it's great to have you
Thank
on the team. All right. Thanks, Disha.
you, Laura.